Alligator Alcatraz, the tent concentration camp in the Florida Everglades, is finally going to shut down. This is a huge victory for the American people. This is a huge victory for immigrants. But let's be very clear here that this was a multi-layered scam, a multi-layered scheme to try and roll out fascism, but also to grift and graft public money, right? To launder public money to supporters of Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. This has been a massive, massive waste of taxpayer resources. And also it has inflicted tremendous suffering on the people who were kept prisoner there. Oh, let's not forget the environmental devastation using a fragile habitat, a protected sacred site, and putting in a concentration camp. So do you remember when this first started that we saw some of the worst of what MAGA could be, some of the most inhumane memes I've seen anywhere, right? Where Republicans, especially on Facebook, and I don't know how many of them are bot accounts, but a lot of them weren't bots, unfortunately. A lot of them were real people. And I saw videos that people were making cheering for Alligator Alcatraz, cheering at the idea of immigrants being eaten alive by alligators. Like that was funny, that was entertainment to them. And, you know, a number of us connected it to propaganda and behavior around the antebellum South, around lynchings in the South. You saw, you know, postcards with young men who'd been lynched in the South. And I couldn't help but think, like, that's so much like the memes on social media where they're AI generated memes of immigrants who've been eaten or in the process of being eaten by alligators. It's the same level of inhumanity and cruelty, the way that people are so detached from their humanity that the deaths of other people, the murders of other people are like a source of entertainment to them. Also, a number of people connected it to a lot of the propaganda and rhetoric that was happening in Germany in the 1930s and 40s. It's something that I don't really understand, how people are capable of that level of inhumanity, that level of embracing the banality of evil, right? But they didn't see any problem with it. And we saw this display all over social media of just the kind of like absolute dehumanization and hatred for immigrants, the way that people were delighting in violence, finding it funny, finding the thought of innocent people being eaten alive is funny. Okay, I could talk about that forever because it's still something that I struggle with, that like so many Americans are low-key fine with and enjoy fantasizing about other people's pain and suffering and death. So, okay, I'm sorry, don't want to bring it down. This is overall a good story. But I think maybe we should wrestle with that. We should wrestle with what the fuck is wrong with so many people in this society. Like, what have we done to the children in this society? Like, how is it that we have raised children that grow into adults that think this way and behave this way and like are so broken inside that that this is the way they view other people? Set that aside for now. So this concentration camp opened. It was announced that it was going to be put together very, very quickly. Donald Trump came down and made a big to-do of it. There was merch that was being sold. Concentration camp merch was being sold. Peak capitalism there, right? Final boss of capitalism is concentration camp merch. But overall, this was really, it was really about laundering public money. It was really about the grift, because Ron DeSantis, who wants to be president, right? He didn't want Donald Trump to be president. He thought he would be president. This competing malignant narcissist. He said that it was going to cost $1.2 billion to quickly throw together essentially a tent with like cages inside it, right? Huge, massive costs. And at the time, contractors were raking it in, right? Contractors who had donated to Donald Trump or donated to Ron DeSantis, they got the bids. The catering company, the food companies that were bringing in these paltry meals, insufficient calories, rotten food, they all were big Republican donors because it's all about the grift, right? The thing about Republicans is that corruption is the name of the game. With Donald Trump, every accusation is a confession. So when he says drain the swamp, when he says he's going to, cut waste, fraud, and abuse, what he really means is I am the guy who is the swamp, and I am super down with waste, fraud, and abuse. So you have to understand the way that he communicates. We do understand by now the way that he communicates. So this was all about using public money, and it was about paying back all of the donors to Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. And it worked fantastically well. All of that public money very quickly, right, out of the public coffers and into the pockets of these contractors and these Trump donors, Trump loyalists, Ron DeSantis loyalists. And then now, I think a number of these guys, especially, there was some reporting at the time, I don't know if it's been updated, that a number of these guys were like really DeSantis loyalists, and he's hoping that they will back him as he seeks to run for president or whatever his future political ambitions are. I don't know if he still thinks that he's going to run for president. There's so many guys, right? Marco Rubio, Tucker Carlson, Ron DeSantis, so many of these Republicans who think that they are going to be challengers to J.D. Vance because J.D. is so uncharismatic and so unlikable and so cringe and embarrassing. They think that they can unseat him. And they all know that Donald Trump, 80 years old, demented as fuck, and unable to run for a third term because the Constitution bars it, right? They know that there's, right, they've all got ambitions. Anyway, so, the grift worked. But the concentration camp is being shut down. We got an announcement this week that contractors have been hired to oversee operations. I'm reading from The Hill here, by the way. Operations for full demobilization of the facility. The Miami Herald is reporting on it, New York Times as well. More than 4 sources have come forward saying, yeah, there's been significant progress made in dismantling the site. Now, we knew that there were tribes in Florida who had filed lawsuits saying this is our sacred ground and you're violating multiple treaties. We knew that there was tons of activity trying to shut down this concentration camp for a long time. Change doesn't happen as swiftly as we would like. We live in a culture of instant gratification. We have to understand that these things take a while, especially because the fascists are far more tenacious, I think, than a lot of people in the resistance movement. They have the kind of arrogance and hubris where they think like, I deserve to win. I'm not gonna stop because the good guys tell me to stop. And so when they get hit with setbacks and the court rules against them and they don't get their way, they don't just give up and go home. We so often have one setback, one loss in court. We see the regime do one bad thing and we're like, we're cooked. America is over. Nothing we can do. Instead of being like, oh, those fuckers aren't going to win. I'm not going to let them win. You think that setback is going to stop the resistance? Fuck no. But with Alligator Alcatraz, we saw them not being willing to shut it down until it reached a point where they just didn't have any choice, right? They get backed into a corner. It becomes untenable for them to keep it open. And so, we saw about a week and a couple of days ago, maybe, we saw reports that the detainees who were left in Alligator Alcatraz, there have been men in that facility languishing for a year, being kept in a concentration camp for a year. We saw that they were moved to other ICE concentration camps around the country. We were told initially, like, this is a precaution as we are moving into hurricane season. Yeah, but, don't trust anything that DHS says. So they moved all of the prisoners out. They didn't free them. They moved them to other concentration camps. But then they started deconstructing Alligator Alcatraz on Monday of this week. Remember Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis? They had this big stroll through as a big PR event. Like, this is what we're doing. We're putting concentration camps everywhere. We're going to have these kinds of cages with tents around them all over, and you can't stop us. We're inevitable, and it will happen. I want you to understand how hard they project, how hard they are trying to future fake you. They wanted you to think that we could not stop them from doing this everywhere all across the country. By the way, did you watch the video I put out right before this one? Stephen Miller has had to abandon his plan to use warehouses to do concrete concentration camps, warehousing hundreds of thousands of human beings. They've abandoned that, and they're starting to sell off all of those warehouses. This is because the people have resisted. The people have said, we're not accepting a future of this country where there are tent concentration camps, where there are concrete concentration camps. And we are continuing to say, we're actually not accepting any future that has ICE in it at all. ICE must be abolished. The majority of Americans think that ICE needs to be abolished. DHS needs to be defunded. The camps need to be liberated. We are moving in the right direction. We are seeing them having to concede one thing and then another as DHS rolls back because they are so unpopular, because it's so wrong. What they're doing is so wrong, and the American people are not tolerating it. We have to keep the pressure on long term until all of the camps are dismantled and all of the detainees are liberated. Keep the pressure up, y'all. We are making progress. We are winning. Keep going.